Today on Locked On Canadiens, we talk about which Habs would deserve to be in a top 100 NHL player list. We also look at the division standings and make some predictions of our own. And finally, let's talk once again about the possibility of the Habs trading that Carey Price contract.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. As part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host Ian Boisvert. Ian is off for today and tomorrow's episodes, but he will be back next week, and potentially we'll have some news to talk about next week, and we'll have more on that in our third segment. But first, I want to talk a little bit about an exercise we're doing here on the Locked On NHL channel. And then I want to talk about some standings predictions, and you'll know why in a moment. And in the meantime, again, we're going to talk a little bit about that possibility. People keep talking about it. Everyone is convinced it's going to happen. So let's get into it in our third segment. So because I'm solo today, you will have to bear with me. I do want to apologize for the lateness of the episode. This was supposed to come out on Wednesday, but I had an unexpected personal obligation to deal with. Everything is fine, but I just was not able to put out the episode for Wednesday. It is now out for the Thursday. All right. I do want to get into the meat of this segment before we move on to other things. So the Locked On NHL channel is doing a top 100 NHL players list. And initially we were asked for the top 4 to 7 players on each of our respective teams. And now we're in the stage where every NHL host is voting for it, is ranking the players so that we will have our top our top 100 NHL players list come out in due time. There'll also be obviously some content related to that. And here on this show, we'll talk a little bit about our reasoning and our voting. But what I wanted to share with you was our list for the top 4 to 7 players that we were asked for the Montreal Canadiens. I do want to preface this by saying Ian and I had to come to an agreement. So each show was able to submit one list. However, when it comes time to voting on the rankings, we have both were allowed to, or every co-hosted show was allowed to submit as many rankings as there were hosts. So I am currently still working on my rankings. Ian was on top of his and he did them on Sunday. I have not done mine yet. Mine are due. They're due on Friday. So I will have to get right on that. So I wanted to share the players with you guys. I wanted to tell you why we picked who we picked. And then I wanted to invite you to give us your thoughts and your opinions. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe you disagree with us. Maybe you do agree with us. Or maybe you just want to tell us who your top 4 to 7 Montreal Canadiens are. So here goes. We had to come to a consensus. We had to both decide and be sure of our decision. Our number 1 player we submitted 6, not 7 players. First of all, a lot of people just submitted 4. Some people submitted 7, but we submitted 6 players. Our number 1 player was Nick Suzuki. I don't think anyone can argue with that. I think currently Nick Suzuki is the most important / best player on the Montreal Canadiens. Our second player was Lane Hutson. Our third player was Juraj Slafkovsky. Our fourth player was Cole Caufield. Our fifth player was Samuel Montembeault, and our sixth player was Noah Dobson. So you'll notice we did not include Patrik Laine on that list, even though he's a former second overall pick with an immense amount of talent and some really good seasons under his belt. However, at this moment in time, he's not recovered fully from his injuries of the past few years, as well as, getting back on the ice. He's not fully back, right? There's an entirely strong possibility that if we were asked for this list next year, Patrik Laine would feature on it as maybe the 7th player, maybe not. But it's up to him, and he looks determined to really come back this year and really, really make an impression. And he's convinced, or he's confident that the Canadiens will make the playoffs. we won't be on pins and needles in the last game of the season, desperately willing them to make the playoffs. That's his prediction. And you'll have mine in our next segment. So that's an omission. And then another glaring omission would be Ivan Demidov. Now, we could have easily put Ivan Demidov on this list as that seventh best player. Objectively, the potential that he has is to be better than all 6 players on this list. There's a potential for him to be number 1 on this list. But we felt currently this is not the time, because we're not voting on this list based on potential. We're voting on this list based on talent, ability, performance, right? So we left Ivan Demidov off because he's played a total of 5 NHL games, 7 NHL games, and 5 playoff. Sorry, 2 regular season games, 5 playoff games, for a total of 7 games in the NHL. Now, I think that's entirely possible that this time next year, if you ask me this question, he would be number 2 on this list. He could also be number 7 on the list. He could not be on the list at all, but that's unlikely. So the reason we omitted Ivan Demidov is his body of work is non-existent. Why did we include Noah Dobson? We included Noah Dobson's body of work even when he was not on the Montreal Canadiens, because you're asking me who on the current roster, if I check who's a current Montreal Canadian, who belongs in this top 7, let's say. Well, let's call it the top 7, right? So we both talked about this. Now, is it likely that he's going to make it into that top NHL 100 in the voting? I don't think so, but we were asked at this point, that was the assignment. We tried to adhere and properly understand the assignment. I'm sure you'll also have questions as to why we put Samuel Montembeault ahead of Noah Dobson, because I think part of it's not just about the current body of work, it's also about importance to the Montreal Canadiens. They're both players that are currently at Team Canada's camp, right? Olympic camp. But if you're asking me also who has a better shot of making the actual team that goes to the Winter Olympics, obviously Samuel Montembeault's on it. And on this show, we have definitely been guilty of underrating Samuel Montembeault. Not, I would say, like, not. We underrated him. Like, we don't have any negative feelings towards him. It's just sometimes we forget the value that he has, right? We neglect his value on this show. So that, in having that conversation, like, we also kind of laughed about, like, are we finally giving him his due, Samuel Montembeault, his due? I think the next question, and I think maybe a lot of people will disagree because we keep talking about current body of work, et cetera, is ranking Juraj Slafkovsky ahead of Cole Caufield. Because if you look at the production, yes, you're looking at Cole Caufield. You would put Cole Caufield before Juraj Slafkovsky. So you'd have Nick Suzuki, Lane Hutson, then Cole Caufield. I think part of our reasoning, I know part of our reasoning, we were talking about it, is what does he do and what does he bring? And Juraj Slafkovsky can be more versatile, can do a wider range of things than Cole Caufield can do. There was a little bit of an element of potential in that vote in ranking one before the other. I think you could easily have put Cole Caufield ahead of Slafkovsky, and I'm sure some of you will. I'm very, very curious about your list, right? Give us your top 4 to 7 players. But personally, like, that's where we were at with this vote, putting Slafkovsky ahead, because I thought about, currently we're in the off season. Last season, Cole Caufield definitely took a huge step ahead. Slav still had the second half Slav problem where it took him a while to get going, but when you watched what he did in the playoffs, towards the end of the season and in the playoffs, like, I really do think that his importance to the team overshadows a little bit Cole Caufield's importance. I'm not saying Cole Caufield is not important. I'm not saying we don't need scoring. I'm not saying we don't need somebody like him. And I'm also not saying that we underrate Cole Caufield, because I know a lot of other fan bases do. For some reason, for some fan bases, they get this perverse joy out of any time Cole Caufield does not succeed, or does not succeed to where we think he should. Anyways, all of this to say is that was our reasoning for our votes, for the way that we voted for our top 4 to 7 players. We put 6. So please tell us, in the comments. You can email us. You can, communicate with us on social media. Tell us your thoughts and on who you would put on this list. And then once the voting is done and all this comes out, I do have a very strong feeling that we as Montreal Canadiens fans are going to feel like our players were underrated in this list, but we'll see. I have faith in my fellow hosts to know what they're talking about, and to put biases aside and really give these Canadians their due. I also just want to, while you're doing this exercise, I want you to look back to 3 years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Look back to those teams and really, really consider, what the players, the quality of the players that are on that list now, and the quality of the players that would have been on this list had you been asked for this exercise, back then. It really gave me a really good feeling. All right, up next, I want to talk about some standings predictions for a very, very important reason. One, it's topical, and two, a lot of people are upset about a lot of things, and that's coming up just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I'm going to say that again. If your first $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. You can bet player props, building a same game parlay, or even jump in live as the action is unfolding. It brings you closer to the game. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're just watching your team or you're keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. I know it's fantasy football season. I know a lot of you have a lot to share about your rosters. It's a fun time. And FanDuel is quick, easy, and it is the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bets. All right, listeners, we have an important request for you. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. And thank you for helping us out. All right, let's talk about the NHL division standings predictions. Now, a lot of people have been doing their content, their predictions. A lot of it has been coming out recently. There was one that the community was really upset about today. And when I say community, I mean I saw it on various social media sites, and it had the Habs ranked at the bottom of the division, below everybody else. And the person claimed that last year they had the most accurate standings predictions. Now, that's true in that they were the most accurate. However, former co-host Scott Matla did the math, and they were still 10 points off for a lot of the teams, an average of 10 points off. So let's not get upset about this. But it did give me the opportunity to think about where I would put the division. And I want to go through it right now real quick. So if we want a recap of what happened this year, Toronto Maple Leafs were at the top. Didn't really help them all that much. Tampa Bay Lightning were next. Florida came in third. And that didn't hurt them one bit. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Ottawa Senators were next, then Montreal, then Detroit, Buffalo, and Boston at the bottom. Now, the reason that I said that mostly was because I wanted to repeat that Boston was at the bottom. I also wanted to talk about how the Toronto Maple Leafs were at the top, and it did them no good. So let's talk about this, right? So I don't think that it's too far-fetched to say that Florida would be at the top, but I think there's a strong possibility that they won't, because as we've pointed out in other shows, Florida doesn't really care about winning the division. They don't care about the President's Trophy. They just need to get in, and then they know that they're going to be able to do a lot of damage, right? Florida has a lot of confidence. They have a lot of talent. It does not matter. It truly does not. The Montreal Canadiens swept them last year, but who was the one who won the cup, right? So I'm still going to say that the Toronto Maple Leafs will regress a bit. I think, though, that Tampa still has one season in the tank. Like, they're still going to go for it. I want to say I'm going to put Tampa ahead of Toronto, and I don't know if that's bias, right? I do think that Boston will not come in last in the division, but I don't think that they'll be in the top three. So my top three is Tampa, Toronto, and then Florida. I think the Montreal Canadiens will finish fourth ahead of the Ottawa Senators, and then they're going to have to play that juggernaut of teams to get past the first round. Not a big fan, not looking forward to it. I do feel that the Ottawa Senators will be up next, below Montreal. So far I've got 4 and 5 are Montreal and Ottawa. And then I think, and this might be crazy, but I think it's going to be Boston, Buffalo, and Detroit. The reason that I say that is because I feel like Detroit, for some reason, things were going really well, and then they ended up shooting themselves in the foot because last season, not the one that just passed, but the one before, they came close to making the playoffs. And even though it ended in heartbreak, the energy that that team had and the ability to pull it together and really, really make a run for it was really impressive. Whereas last season, it felt towards the end that they gave up and they were imploding. Now, that's an intangible. I know we don't always want to talk about intangibles, but when I look at the improvements that the team tried to make in the offseason, I don't know that they're enough to move the needle. Like I'm, honestly, don't love when Ottawa does good things. Really felt their offseason was pretty decent. I just, with Detroit, there were no strong feelings either way. And then with Buffalo, poor Buffalo. But I think they won't come in last. I think they'll come in second last. For some reason, there's just something about the way Detroit is that I feel like they're going to do a New York Rangers style implosion, but they'll do it earlier in the year. So the New York Rangers last year, I think they finished fifth in their division, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, fifth in their division. I think, with Detroit, it's going to be a little bit different. And then there's going to be a lot of, you can't have, I think it's Ian that says this, you can't have a beloved franchise player become your front office, become your head coach. It's too hard. That's why, there's an advantage to Martin St. Louis never having been a Montreal Canadien, right? His legacy is not as a Montreal Canadien. Hopefully it will be, though. Anyways, and then so the reason then I find that Boston is going to be ahead of those two guys is just by default, because Buffalo will always disappoint you, but something about Detroit, just there's something about them. And again, I love Detroit Red Wings fans. I really want for them. I want happiness for them. I want joy. I would much rather they make the playoffs over Toronto, over Tampa, over Ottawa, and technically over Florida, but that's not going to happen. I would much rather that, but I'm not seeing it. And this, honestly, maybe what's going to end up happening is Detroit ends up eliminating Montreal from contention at some point. And I will have to eat crow on the podcast, and our beloved Brian and Scotty at Locked On Red Wings will be able to kind of dance on my prediction grave. I find that saying that Montreal is going to finish last in the division with only 82 points is extremely lazy. They've got too much talent to do that. The problem that Montreal has is not that they're not talented enough to potentially make a run for it and make the playoffs. The problem that they have is that they're in an impossible division. That's the problem. So again, I think it's very lazy. I think that prediction, the author of it claims to have really done some homework on it. I just don't believe it. I don't. I think when you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, you're always going to be a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. You're always going to want to discount. It's like when they said that Cole Caufield was terrible and Nick Robertson was so much better. The only team that Nick Robertson is good against is Montreal. So, it's just one of those things. Anyways, I didn't want to get into a tangent. I just want everyone to calm down about that, because I just saw people getting so annoyed. I don't even think it was trolling. I think it was lazy. I truly believe it was an inability to give the Montreal Canadiens their due, and a lazy narrative. All right. Anyway, so that's my prediction. We'll see what happens at the end of next season. If I jinx the Montreal Canadiens in any way, you can all blame me. That's fine. I'll do a hot ones or whatever. I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe I'm like Patrick Lightning. Maybe I have that confidence. All right. Up next, it's time once again to talk about that Carey Price contract. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without even touching a spreadsheet. You can, talk about, like, you can identify where you're not saving. For me, the biggest one was all that incidental spending, right? A little treat here, a coffee there. Every time I left the house, I was spending a lot of money cumulatively. So Monarch really helped me see that. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser. You got to use your browser for this to get half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. And once again, you got to use your browser for this. So real quick, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow is the mailbag. I do have a couple questions. I am going to need more. So please send me mailbag questions at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can also send mailbag questions to lockedoncanadians at Blue Sky, whether you reply us or DM us. You can also DM us or reply us on TikTok at Locked On Canadians or on Instagram at Locked On Canadians. So once again, please send me mailbag questions for tomorrow's mailbag episode. Locked On Canadians at gmail.com. Locked On Canadians on Blue Sky. Locked On Canadians on Instagram. Locked On Canadians on TikTok. I think I've said Locked On Canadians like 700 times today. All right, let's get into the Carey Price contract. So Carey Price has his final bonus for the last year of his contract due on September 1st. There's a lot of talk in this market about the contract being traded soon after that. The reason that I want to talk about it today is because there's too much smoke for there not to be, some fire. There are too many dialed in people bringing this up as a possibility for it not to be at least a conversation in the NHL. The thing that people are kind of in disagreement about is whether if a team takes on the contract, they will require a sweetener to take it, or if they will pay us to take it. Having Carey Price's contract is a boon to a lot of teams. If you're struggling to meet the cap floor, or if you might need that LTIR space, Carey Price's contract is a really attractive option. It's also useful for the Canadiens. Like, they can use that LTIR space. I know that the conversation is about them shopping it, right? There are some teams that could want it. Everybody's looking at Utah, but I want to look at San Jose. They need this contract to reach the cap floor. There's a lot of conversation about Seattle too, because that's the team that he was going to be picked by, or that he waived his no move clause to be selected by. And I think that that's totally it's a totally fair possibility. I also do want to apologize because earlier I said that Scott Matla was the one that did the math. I almost called him Scott Matla. Scott Matla was the one that did the math. It was not. It was our good friend Jay Foster from Locked On Columbus Blue Jackets, who we will have on for some really fun segments very, very shortly. But yes, it was Jay Foster that did the math for the NHL standings predictions, where the person who released them was an average of 10.4 points off. Back to the Carey Price contract. I think it's like the Canadiens do not need to add a sweetener. A lot of people have thrown in Joshua Roy in there. I think that you don't do it. You ask for something in return. If somebody wants Carey Price's contract, whether it's to get to the cap floor, to take advantage of the LTIR or whatever, again, you don't have to pay that real money. You just get to have that contract on your cap. So it's such a sweet deal. Anyways, the reason that we wanted to change our schedule for next week, ordinarily you would see us on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You will see us on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday next week. because we will be waiting for the Carey Price contract news to drop on Monday, if anything will drop, because that's the earliest we will hear anything official, or any earliest we will hear any of the insiders really be able to have a concrete idea of what's happening. I think they kind of do have a concrete idea. I think they just can't say it other than vaguely alluding to it. Anyways, also, listeners, let me know in the comments. Do you think that Carey Price's deal is an advantage and people should pay the Montreal Canadiens for it? Or do you think that the Canadiens need to throw in a sweetener? And if so, who? I've seen Sean Verrill. I've seen Joshua Roy. I think the fan base has given up on those players, and I don't think it's necessarily incorrect. So please just let us know what you think. I'm really curious as to your thoughts. And again, like we're gonna be talking about this on Tuesday, so things might have changed drastically between now and then. And again, you have to also think about Carey Price has to waive his no movement clause in order to be traded. I think for me, the hardest thing about all of this is not the LTIR space. It's not what return we get. It's the fact, the idea that Carey Price's last, contract is going to end with him not as a Montreal Canadien. So I really do hope that if this contract trade does happen, they sign him for a day so he can retire a Montreal Canadien. I know it's gimmicky. I don't care. I want to see it. I cannot think of Carey Price as anything other than the Montreal Canadiens. Like, he was the Montreal Canadiens for a long time. Anyway, send your thoughts. We'll keep an eye on it. Rumor roundup, all of that. I really quickly want to do our trivia answer for the last trivia. So if you missed the last episode, it was a hockey trivia, not a Habs trivia question. Ian held up a ticket of a game that he had attended at Madison Square Garden on December 27th, 2019, between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. He asked what was significant about that game. The answer is, and I believe it was Jason Enland that got the answer. I did not see anyone else get this answer. We got a lot of good guesses. And the significance of that game was that it was Henrik Lundqvist's last win at Madison Square Garden, and Ian got to attend that. All right. We will bring back trivia next week. I did take a stab at writing some questions, and I am honestly not as good as my co-host is at this. I will try, I promise. Sometimes I do come up with some of the questions that we do have on the trivias at the end of the episodes, but this time around, I just couldn't make one work. I had one in mind about Carey Price, and then it just got too late, and I really need to put this episode out for you. So we won't have trivia today. But we will have our mailbag episode tomorrow. So by the time you hear this, please send in your mailbag questions. I'll be recording on Thursday evening after dinner. So you have plenty of time, and you can send me your mailbag questions. Locked On Canadiens. You can reach us on Instagram, Locked On Canadiens. You can reach us on TikTok. We're at Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed to this podcast wherever you get podcasts, as well as on YouTube. I promise you, when my co-host is here, it's a lot more dynamic and a lot more fun. These solo shows are like really, really hard for me. And then you can also, find us on social media. You can find him at Maybe It's Ian. You'll find me at The Active Stick. I promise you, we will be back next week. In the meantime, I will see you tomorrow with the mailbag.